Hello, folks. My name is Mike Miller. I've been a volunteer with the Shoeless Joe Jackson Museum since 2008. And through my research, I would like to explain to you how I feel Joe Jackson received his nickname, Shoeless Joe. One of the important articles that I ran across was this article that you're seeing here that was written back on December 28, 1942, and it was done by Scoop Lattimore, who was a popular sports writer here in Greenville for many years. And I'm going to read you this article, and then we're going to move on and talk a little bit about how Joe received his name. Often we were asked, how did Joe Jackson acquire the nickname of Shoeless Joe? There have been various stories about the origin of the famous moniker for the world's greatest slugger, but for the most part these were figments of imagination or wildly exaggerated. A yarn of wide circulation reported that Joe played barefooted for the Greenville Club back in 1908, and one afternoon while running over broken glass in the outfield went to manager Tommy Stouch and said, "Look a-here, Mr. Stouch, you better move those busted bottles from the field. They ain't hurting my feet, but they're cutting up the balls." It made good copy, all right, but was far from the truth. So let's get the real facts from Joe himself. We found the famous star of the Cleveland Indians and the Chicago White Sox in the mood of reminiscence as he was spreading Christmas cheer among the youngsters in West Greenville. The nickname Shoeless Joe was tagged on him by a wag and in the bleachers at Anderson during a Carolina Association game back in 1908, the day before Joe had been called in from the outfield for a job of relief pitching. Unopportunely, a fastball got away from him, and the wild pitch broke the arm of a great little third baseman by the name of Myers, who already had been sold to Brooklyn. The next afternoon, playing at Anderson, where Myers was an idol, outfielder Ezra Midkiff of the Greenville team broke his leg, and Jackson, who was not expected to play, had to be sent into the game. Although he had blisters on his feet pitching without a toe plate the previous day, he played all during the game in his stocking feet to give the paining dogs as much comfort as possible. About the seventh inning, Joe smacked a home run over the fence, and as he rounded third base, a wide-mouthed fan shouted, "You shoeless so-and-so." A sports writer picked up and ran the squib, and somehow the nickname caught the public's fancy and admiration. When Joe, together with Hyder Bar, was sold late that summer to Connie Mack for $15,000 for the pair, the Shoeless Joe moniker must have been thrown in to boot to the Philadelphia press. For years, Joe resented the handle as a reflection on his early environment, for he never really played barefooted in pro ball, but now he takes it in stride. This evening Sun is being guilted by friendly calls of a mass of fan letters he receives from all parts of the country, and usually these are addressed Shoeless Joe. I get more mail now than when I was playing ball, and I only wish I had the time to answer all of it. He said also, "I have the request to go to New York for broadcast, but I'm content to stay here and live in a home by the side of the road and be a friend to man." Okay. Now, that's the first article that I came across, and this is a big part of Joe's name. Another article which I ran across, this was just after Joe played these games, and Scoop Lattimore said these games were played in Anderson, but believe me, I've studied Joe's history, and these games were actually played at Meminger Street Park here in Greenville, South Carolina. And this paper here, this article that I'm showing you here, is talking about Myers getting his arm hit, and they ended up calling Joe Gatling Gun Jackson. And so this is the article talking about the incident that happened and how Anderson felt about it. So I'm going to run you through the story and let you know how this all played out, because like I said, I've studied the games that Joe played in here in Greenville and in Anderson, and I know how everything laid out. So I'm going to take you through that. Let me show you a couple other pictures here. This league that Joe played in 1908 was called the Carolina League, and this is Joe Jackson here. This is a young kid named Eskew who's going to become important in the story. And this is the old Greenville ball field, which is known as Mimiger Street Park or Furman Park. And in this league, the Carolina League, there were 3 teams from South Carolina. One was Greenville, Spartanburg, Anderson, and those were the teams from South Carolina. And there were 3 teams from North Carolina. They were Winston-Salem, Charlotte, and Greensboro. Greensboro ended up winning the league title by half a game over Greenville at the end of the year. But this picture here, this is the actual ballpark that this happened at. And this area right in here, somewhere over in here, was probably where the Anderson fan was sitting when this incident, when he called out, "You shoeless so-and-so," and Joe was turning third coming for home. So this was a horse show that they were showing at the ballpark. We really don't have any other pictures of this ballpark, but it's pretty neat that we have this. Now, I guess what I'm going to do is go over this game, and we'll focus in on Shoeless Joe here. But what happened was on June 4th, 5th, and 6th of 1908, Joe's team, the Greenville Spinners, was leading the league, and this Anderson team was at the bottom of the league, and they came into Greenville here at Mimiger Street Park to play against Joe's team. And Joe's team was getting demolished by this Anderson team. They came up to about the 7th inning, and it was something like 15-3. And so Coach Stouts, this is Tommy Stouts right here, he decided to send Joe into the box to pitch. Joe had pitched in the textile leagues, but he really didn't do much pitching other than spring training with this Greenville team. And so he decided to send Joe in, mainly because they were getting beat so bad and they had ran out of pitchers. They only carried like 12 players. So they sent Joe in to pitch. But what they would do back then was they would do what they call calling the game. They would have an operator sitting in the stands, and he would actually send a telegraph to an auditorium in Anderson, and you would have a person in the auditorium reading a ticker tape, and the fans would hear the game play by play. And what this little operator decided to do, since the Anderson team was the last place team, and believe me, they picked on each other, these newspapers, people did all the time. But what the little ticker tape guy decided to do was play a joke on these Anderson fans sitting in the auditorium. And he stated when Joe came in from center field to come in to pitch, that Tommy Stouts sent the little 10-year-old mascot out to take Joe's place in center field. And these fans sitting in the auditorium never knew anything different, because he never told them anything different. He told them that's who was going out there, and they thought that was happening. So Joe came in to pitch, and he did, just as the article was stating from the Anderson paper. Joe hit 5 batters. One of the guys he hit was a fella named Myers, and he hit him in the arm, and he literally broke the guy's arm. He hit him so hard with the baseball. And this guy was supposed to be moving up, and he was put out of baseball pretty much. Joe hit him so hard. And so they were quite upset, and that's why that article came out that they were talking about. They were calling Joe actually Gatling Gun Jackson, because he was so wild with it and everything. So the Anderson fans were very much upset with what they were reading in the paper on Friday morning. Well, they had the Friday game, which was on June 5th, and then they played, the Greenville won that game, and then they have the Saturday game. On Saturday, everybody would travel, usually by train, and many of these Anderson folks traveled up from Anderson to Greenville to watch this final game against Anderson in Greenville. And they got into the 7th inning again, and surprisingly, Joe's first place Greenville team was behind this last place Anderson team by 1 run. And Joe comes up to his coach, and it's about right before the 7th inning, and would like to sit out. Well, the coach asked, "What's the matter?" Well, all we knew was that Joe's feet were bothering him. We don't know if it's because he pitched or what, but according to Scoop Latimer's article, it was because of his pitching. But Anyway, Joe got the bright idea of taking those cleats off, putting them in the dugout, and he went out into center field in his stockings. The next half inning, Joe was called in. He was the first batter up. And when he hit the ball, I remember the paper stated that it was the longest ball hit at this ballpark at that time. And as Joe was rounding third base, some Anderson fan that came there that day jumped up out of his seat and shouted, "You shoeless so-and-so." And that's exactly how Joe got that famous nickname. Joe came back. The article mentioned, I think it said an inning or two later, that Joe came back and got the hit to drive in the winning run, and so they ended up winning that game. But that is exactly how Joe Jackson got his famous nickname, and it did happen at Mimiger Street Park here in Greenville, South Carolina. Thank you.